Here I'll show you 5 tips for evaluating complex formulas and structures in Microsoft Excel. I'll start with some simple tools to help you understand what's going on, and then end with a method to deconstruct and understand large complex formulas in Excel.
Before we start, check the video description and click the link to TeachExcel so you can download the files for the tutorial and follow along. And make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.
The very first tip that I'm going to show you is how to see which formulas affect which cells within the worksheet. This isn't specific necessarily to complex formulas and functions, but it will certainly help you understand them better as well as complex structures within a worksheet. So let's say you want to see where some of your values here come from. So you double click cell, we see that we've got monthly growth rate up here. And now you want to see what cells use monthly growth rate. Well, we can select the cell, go to the formulas tab, and hit trace dependence. And you see arrows that point to all the cells that use this cell. That means that every cell down here has a formula in it. And the cool thing about this is if we click trace dependence again, we'll see the next row of dependence. So we can see what depends on what. It's a pretty cool little feature. And if we go and let's say we reverse that, so I want to remove arrows right now. It's going to remove all the little blue dudes so we get back to our normal spreadsheet. Let's say I want to go to month 3 and trace precedence. So that's going to say which cell does this guy rely on? Almost the same as going like this and seeing that it relies on this cell and this cell, but we get to do it multiple times. So this cell and this cell, but then I click it again and we can see the dependence for both of these cells. So month 2 relies on month 1. Monthly growth rate, well, it relies on a cell in another worksheet. Click it again, and we can see that month 1 relies on these cells. So it's got a different formula in it. But what I want to do now that I've showed you trace precedence and trace dependence is how to use this little dude right here. So this goes on another worksheet, but I don't know where it goes on the worksheet. If you double click the dotted line, which can be kind of difficult to do, it'll show you where it goes to. So we can click that and hit OK, and it will take us to where that formula points, which is this cell right here in the watch window worksheet. So these worksheets have almost the same data, but this is the watch window one. You can see the tab down here. And if I go back to the affected cells worksheet, you'll see this one. Now, one little tip that goes along with that, kind of like trace dependence and trace precedence, is that I can use the control and bracket sign, the square bracket opening and closing, to do almost the same thing, but a variation of that. So let's go to monthly growth rate, and let's say I want to see the cells that use it. Well, I can hit control and then close bracket, and it will select those cells. If I do it again, it'll select the cells that depend on that. So it's kind of like let's say a dumbed down version of trace dependence and precedence. It could give you a quick overview, which could be nice. But where it really comes in handy is when I select this dude, hit trace precedence, goes to another worksheet. If I quickly want to easily go there, I can hit control left bracket. And it goes, you might not have noticed, but it just went to the watch window. So if you look at cell A1, you can see we're in watch window. If I go back here, we're in affected cells. So control, open bracket. Now here we are in watch window. And that's because this cell references B6 in watch window. So this is a helpful little tool for figuring out what's going on and evaluating complex formulas and their relationships. But it's not the end all and be all. So let's move on to the next worksheet tab where I'm going to introduce you to the watch window. So this window is almost exactly the same, except for here, our average ticket price is taken from values down here. Now it seems a little bit odd you have to scroll so far, but what I'm illustrating is that these values, if they change here, it's going to change a cell that we cannot currently see. To solve that, we have the watch window. So we go over here on the formulas tab and click watch window. It's this little dude that opens up here, and if you want, you can make it a tiny window. Click the drop down arrow, click move, and then when you see the little arrow dude like that, just click and drag down, and we have a little window that hovers over the worksheet. And what we can do is to add cells here that we want to pay attention to, regardless of where we are, not just in the worksheet, but the workbook or even other open workbooks. So click Add Watch, select the cell that you want, hit Add. Let's say we also want to select monthly growth rate, so I'll click that and Add Watch. Okay. And now we have two little cells that we're going to watch. And if you want to pop it back here above the formula bar, just click, drag it up, and there we go. You can also change the size, or you can make the columns a little bigger. It's really helpful. It shows you the workbook, where the cell is located, the worksheet, if it has a name or not, that will be there, the cell, the value, and the formula. We want to pay attention to the value. So let's go down here, and now all those cells are off the screen. Let's assume you had useful data between these two locations. And let's say we want to change purchase order number 7. So watch right here in the watch window, cell B10 is 4640. I'm going to change this to 30. And it's now 4490. It's great. Now look, when I go to other worksheets, you can see it's still up there. So if a cell on some far-flung worksheet affects one of the cells that you have in the watch window, you're going to see what happens. And that's really, really useful when you have not just complex formulas and functions, but complex relationships. And if I hit Control N to open up a new window, let's pull this guy down here. Here our watch window is, so we can still look at it. And this is helpful if you have workbooks that are linked together. All right, let's close this window. And if you want to remove a cell, just select it, hit delete watch, and we can close the window and get back to normal. So that rounds out the tools for sort of figuring out complex relationships between formulas, or complex formulas in and of themselves, because let's say you have a giant formula right here and you're not exactly sure how a cell in a far-flung part of the worksheet is going to affect it. Well, the watch window will at least let you keep an eye on it. Now let's move beyond evaluating just the relationships between the formulas and on to evaluating the formulas themselves. And we're going to use two cool little tricks or features for evaluating the cells, the formulas. What I've got here is a text manipulation formula. It's going to get the last segment from a cell. I pulled it from another tutorial that I did, and depending on your skill in Excel, this is either going to be a simple or a complex formula. Let's say that you open it up and you are pretty familiar with what's going on, but you want to analyze individual pieces of it. So that leads us to the first evaluate formula technique, which is that you can do it right in the cell. So if you want to see what this is going to evaluate to, just select it and hit F9, and Excel is going to calculate it and show you the result. So the result of that find function is 6. And if you want to continue, just select the next part of the calculation, hit F9, and it will keep doing that for as many of the pieces as you select. But there is one important thing to pay attention to when you do this. So I've done a few levels of the calculations right now, but if I hit Control Z to undo that, it will only undo the very last one. So what do you do if you've used this technique, this feature a few times? Hit escape. If I hit escape, it takes us back to the original formula. If you hit enter, it's going to save it with those numbers in there, and it's going to remove part of the formula. So all I did is you just select a piece of the formula you'd like to evaluate, and you hit F9. And that leads us to our next tip, which is to do, I would call, the full evaluation. This is the traditional one that a lot of people do when they're trying to figure out what's going on. Select the cell, go to the Formulas tab, and click Evaluate Formula. This allows you to run through the calculation steps exactly how Excel does them or sees them. So you have here the formula in the cell, and what is underlined is what is going to be evaluated when you click the Evaluate button. So I click Evaluate, and we get the value from cell A3. And the cool thing is that if what is currently going to be evaluated when you click this button would lead you to another cell, like right now A3 would, and you click Step In, it'll take you to that cell. So now we are in cell A3. We can see exactly what's in there. And if we want to go back, we just click Step Out. Now we can continue evaluating the cell and see how it does everything. All the way down to the final result. the Evaluate Formula button or feature on the Formulas tab. Really helpful, but I find that oftentimes when I do this, I don't actually understand what's going on, and that leads me to the next tip, which will allow you to break down and explain and learn what's going on with even the most complicated formulas. So let us move to deconstructing formulas. Here we also have a formula that gets the last segment from a cell, but it does it in a dynamic way. So it doesn't matter how many delimiters we have or how many segments or sections, it'll always get the last one. And you can see it's a bit bigger than in the last example. So yes, we could use F9 to go through parts of this to see what's going on with, let's say, substitute right here. And maybe that'll be good enough for you. Or we could select it and go to Evaluate Formula, and maybe you're going to understand it from here, although I doubt it, because it kind of runs through it in a confusing way. But you could try those. However, let's go through it a much, much, much better way. It takes a lot longer, but should help you understand it. So we select the cell here, and what we want to do is start from outside to inside. Now this formula comes from a tutorial that I did called 5 Helpful Text Extraction Tips. And in that tutorial, I tell you to start from inside to out. However, that is because I also explain how everything should work beforehand. But if you're getting a formula where you don't really know what's going on, then it's not going to work going inside to out. It's going to be terrifically confusing. So in this case, starting from scratch, we want to go outside to in. And the first thing that we notice is a right formula. So we can click the formula or just put the cursor in it and see that it has only 2 arguments, a text argument and a number of characters argument. So the text where we want to get some text from the right of, and how many characters from the right of it we want to actually get. So it only has 2 segments, this segment right here and this segment right here. And what we want to do is to start to break them out. So let's break out the first segment equals A3. Okay, so that's a bunch of text. We could make it bigger if we wanted. And now let's get the second segment, a much more confusing segment. And if you fail to copy all of the parentheses here, don't worry, Excel will happily correct you, or will tell you it should be corrected. Now we can see that the right function gets this and 3. So that's how it gets the last 3 characters, because it's told to do so. But now let's break down this guy, because this is where it gets really confusing. So this guy only has 2 parts as well. We have a count of how many characters is in the cell. And if you don't know what any of these functions mean, just click one of them and then click right here where it's highlighted in blue, click the name of the function, and it'll pop up a help window that'll tell you what it does. So this one's going to get the length, the number of characters in the cell. So I'm going to hit escape, go down here and pop that in right here. Now let's get the second section, this section right here, all of this stuff. Copy that in, pull it out here, equals, and pop it in there. So let's take a look at this guy. Here we have the find function, and this will find a certain character within text and return the number, the position where it found that character. So the first position, second position, third position, and so on. But here we have, for the text we want to find, this funky little bar. Now I do not, in cell A3, find a funky little bar. So what's going on? Well, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I understand what this means. This means find the funky little bar. Okay? And let's see, that's the first argument. And then we have a within text argument and a start number argument. Now, easy way to see how many arguments we have in this is to go to the very last parentheses and click right inside of it. That way we're still within the find function, just at the very end. And we can see that the last argument is the within text argument. That means that all of this is one argument, one thing. It returns one value to the find function. Let's copy that, hit escape, scroll over, and let's put that guy right down here, equals, substitute. And there we see our funky little bar. The funky bar that we look for up here. And actually, before I continue, let's remember that this 3 right here is the length minus the result of the find. So we have the length here and find here. So let's go ahead and quickly make the result here equals 13 minus 10. So 3 here, 3 here. Perfect. Now scroll over. Okay. Substitute will replace one character with another character. Easy peasy. So what text do we want to use to replace a character in? Right here, cell A3. What do we want to replace? We want to replace a dash with what? A bar. Okay, so I'm starting to see where we get the bar from. We replace a dash with a bar. And now we have another argument for substitute, which is instance number. Which occurrence of this character do I want to replace? So now we have to figure out which dash do we replace. Okay, so we have more stuff. Copy this. Go down here, equals that. Okay. 4. So I want to replace the fourth instance. How do I get the fourth instance? Okay, we have the length of the cell again. I think you can see where this is going, so maybe I'll speed it up just a little bit. And now we have this funky little dude. Copy it out here. Equal sign in front. I forgot a parentheses. It is correcting me. Yes, accept the correction. Now we have equals 13 minus 9, which equals 4. Perfect. Now here we have the length of the cell again. Don't exactly understand why we have that there yet, but that's because we don't understand what this does. This is the length. We get the length of what, though? Let's get this out of here and see what the heck we're dealing with. Wow, okay. So now here I have cell A3, but without any dashes. So I go in here and I can see we substituted, using the text cell A3, all of the dashes with nothing, with an empty space. So what we then did is we fed that back to a len function to count the number of characters in it. So here we have the number of characters without any dashes. It counts this value right here. And since we got to the end of it, there's nothing else to look into. Well, you could look in A3, but we know what A3 is. There's nothing else to look into. We have fully deconstructed the entire formula. We are ready to now put all the pieces back together to figure out what's going on. So this is A3 without any dashes. We feed it back up into here into the len function to count that. We get a 9. Here, we count how many characters are in the cell total with dashes, 13. That gives us 4. That tells us there are 4 dashes. Perfect. Now we got this number. Now we know there are 4 dashes. We want to replace the very last dash with a bar. So we use the substitute function. And we want to replace the last dash, which is the 4th dash, which we get from this. So that's how we get the last dash right here replaced with a bar. Then we go back up here and we count the position of the bar. We find out where it is in the cell. So you can see here, if we count, we get 10 by the time we get to here. Then all we do is get a count of the total characters in the cell again, subtract 10 by that, and that tells us that there are only 3 characters at the end of the cell. Then we can feed that back up here, the 3, into the right function. So this right here, if I select it and hit F9, is 3. So this is what the right function sees. And then we select A3. And now we can get the last 3 characters from this set of text. B, B, B. Now the one part of this that might still seem confusing is what's up with the bar? What's up with this guy down here? Why did I use a bar? Well, you need to know how the find function works. So if you don't know that, just click in here, click in find, and then click find right there, and you can read how it works. It finds the first occurrence after the start number that's provided, or just from the start of the cell if you don't give it that. So what we want to do is we want to give it a unique character that will never be in the cell so that we can easily find it using the find function. So yes, that might not be obvious when you go through the deconstructing process, but when you figure out what the functions mean, then you should kind of start to piece together, okay, so it should be something that can be easily found but not found anywhere else in the cell, only found where I substituted it in using the substitute function. So a unique character basically. And you can see that it can take a while to fully deconstruct a formula. But that's how you learn how everything works, how all the pieces go together. So basically, this formula right here is all of this combined. And I hope that using this technique, this method here of deconstructing formulas, combined with evaluating the pieces of the formulas, F9 or Formulas tab, evaluate formula, using the watch window to see how changing things affects formulas, and figuring out which cells affect other cells in the worksheet, combining all of these tools together should give you everything you need to effectively evaluate complex formulas and setups in Microsoft Excel.
I hope you liked the tutorial. If it was helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.